When you see your matter going black, rejoice, for this is the beginning of the work. That's a quote from the Rosarium Philosophorum, and it makes me question, who has a natural inclination to rejoice when their world crumbles beneath them? I sure don't. So what are they talking about? They say, when you see your matter going black, rejoice. Why would your crumbling world around you give you reason to rejoice? What are these philosophers talking about? This is the topic of discussion for today. As humans, we fear pain. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. But have you ever stopped to wonder why? Why do you fear pain? And is your reason good enough? Are all of our reasons good enough? To start off, let's look at the definition of pain. From its root and the etymology of the word, pain is described as a condition. It's known as the opposite of pleasure. It includes mental or emotional suffering, grief, distress, difficulty, woe, suffering, or punishment. And so for today's purposes, we will describe pain as a psychobiological state of darkness or disintegration. And so what is the beauty of pain? What is its necessity? Is there some intelligence to the psychobiological state of darkness? I recently read a book called The Black Sun, The Alchemy and Art of Darkness by Stanton Marlan. He was an analyst of the work of Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, who theorized about alchemy, which refers to the process of change, the process that one undergoes to transform themselves into someone better. And so the book The Black Sun refers to the pain that people experience in their process of change. Stanton explores why pain is not only necessary, but it's vitally important for someone to improve themselves. There are a couple Latin terms that I'll refer to that both Stanton Marlan and Carl Jung used in their theories. The first one is soul niger, and in English this actually translates to what is called the black sun. For a person in their process of change, this refers to the collapse of the ego. When our self-identity, everything we believe about ourselves, dies in some way. It's referring to the shadow work. The other term is alchemy, which I referred to earlier as simply the process of change, transformation of matter and self. So let's go back to the question, why do we fear pain? I know for me in my life, that's what feels natural. As a child, pain acts like a signal. It signals that something is wrong, and therefore something needs to be fixed. You think of when a child scrapes their knee, or when a baby starts crying. Every action a parent pursues is trying to get that pain to stop for the child. They try to console the baby to make it stop crying. Or they clean and put a band-aid on the scrape to fix the pain that the child felt. But as we grow up, this relationship to pain evolves. It's commonly taboo for someone to cry in public, at least emotionally. Revealing pain is found as something vulnerable, only to be shared with close friends and family. And with the growing mental health crisis, it's commonly understood that pain is something that's suppressed. Although we as humans may be emotional beings, we're not very emotionally intelligent. Ultimately, we've been taught that pain is a problem to solve, or just avoid. So think for yourself for a moment. When was the last time you avoided discomfort by staying busy, distracted, or silent? I'll identify a few behaviors to help you as you self-reflect. Do any of you overwork? Do any of you feel numb? Does anyone here self-medicate with substances, entertainment, or even other people? How about those that isolate? Do you suffer from self-judgment? All of these behaviors are in the pursuit of avoiding pain, and it's rational. For me, it was numbing, in a variety of ways. But as I did that, my problems never went away. The scientific research says the same. The more you avoid, the more threatening the avoided stimulus becomes. Suppressed pain can embed in the nervous system, contributing to these things: chronic tension, digestive issues, immune dysregulation, and psychosomatic illness like anxiety or depression. So after taking some time to self-reflect, I hope that you've identified at least one pattern in your life where you avoid your pain. Now I want you to think about that example in your life. How has that turned out for you, at least so far? This is a quote from the book The Black Sun that I referenced earlier. It says, "The artist Ad Reinhardt pointed out that we have a natural tendency to rush away from such experiences." He's referencing painful experiences. Yet he encouraged us instead to wait a minute, to hold fast, because looking into blackness requires a period of adjustment. The reward for staying is available to those who have faith enough to withstand infinite duration. He says, staying with darkness allows something to happen that escapes us if we're hasty. If we resist our natural tendency to take flight before painful experiences, we can descend into the dark aspects of the unconscious, which is necessary if we are to make contact with what Goethe calls infinite nature. Turning toward such darkness requires a willingness to stay with suffering and to make a descent into the unconscious. There's a lot in this quote, but I want to point out one thing that we learn from Ad Reinhardt. He explains that pain is coming from the unconscious mind. And if you've seen any of my stuff, you've learned that there are much more than forgotten memories in our unconscious mind. In fact, the unconscious mind is the structure that we've formed in ourselves of how we view ourselves, other people in the world, of what we believe. And although we're unaware of it, it has a profound influence on how we feel and act. You see, our behavior, our conscious thoughts, act independently from our unconscious, but our emotions connect the two. We feel them consciously, but they come from our unconsciousness. And so, in this way, emotion allows us to peer into our unconscious frameworks. We can feel them physically, but they come from the unconscious, come from the unknown. And so what Ad Reinhardt is explaining here is that when we leave pain, when we run away from it because it's uncomfortable, we're missing that opportunity. Our unconscious is still affecting us. We still have the pain. The signal is still trying to get sent out to us, but we're refusing to feel it. We don't take a look. And so this is why he invites us to wait a moment. Don't leave. Stay there a little while. He says that when we stay there, we allow something to happen that escapes us if we are hasty. And so what escapes us? What do we find? What can we find if we stay a little while in the pain? If we feel our emotions? In my research, I've located 4 functions of pain. They are, first, pain locates. It also alerts. Pain has the ability to help us transform. And finally, pain connects. So let's take a look at each function. First, pain locates. In this way, I see pain as a mirror. You see, what hits us reveals where we are. It's kind of like the game Battleship, if you've ever played that. In essence, the game is all about trying to figure out where the opponent's boats are. And similarly, pain has this function for us in our lives. Whether you realize it or not, how we know ourselves is much more elusive than it seems. Pain marks where your values, attachments, and identity are most active. That's because it hits where it hurts. Think of it. If rejection devastates you, it's because connection is sacred to you. If failure crushes you, it's because achievement, identity, or worth are tethered to it. And if a comment cuts deep, it hit a place you already doubted. You had a little bit of insecurity. Otherwise, if you were confident, it wouldn't bother you as much. And so in this way, pain locates us. Not exactly where our strengths are, our confidence lies, but the alternative, where we feel unsure, a little bit insecure. And as humans, this is so important because every day we put on a mask, trying to be our best selves, hiding our insecurities. Because of the taboo surrounded by pain, emotional insecurity, and fear, we put up walls surrounding everything we're not confident in. And so try this function of pain out for yourself. Take a moment to reflect on this question. If someone is going to really hurt you, what hits you the hardest, and why that thing. I've written here, goals show you where you want to go, pain shows you where you are. There's a whole lot of talk on goals. They're important. It's what our aspirations are. It's the vision we hold for ourselves of where we want to go. But how do you make that jump? How do you get from where you are to where you want to be? And I believe the first step is really understanding where you are. Getting rid of the ignorance, the abstract, and the oblivion out of your mind. Because when you know where you are, you're then able to take the first step toward where you want to go. This leads us to the second function of pain. And I've named it that pain alerts us. There's a quote by Francis Weller that says, "Pain is not a pathology, it's a signal. It tells you something is being touched that matters." It's as simple as this. It's like a physical injury. When a kid gets a scrape on their arm, our body has worked in a way that we have nerves. Those nerves signal all the way to the brain a feeling of pain. A signal that something is wrong, something needs attention. And so why as humans would we avoid the signals that we receive in our brain about our emotional state? With this view, it's completely foolish to avoid it. Like physical injury, emotional pain signals that something unseen needs attention. And this leads us to the alchemical role of pain and the process of transformation as humans, how we change. Carl Jung named 4 stages to alchemy. The first one is blackening. This is where the role of the black sun, soul niger, and pain jump in. In order to realign ourselves, we have to break down what's currently there. This refers to the collapse, the death of the old self, old illusions. All of those have to come down. Jung stated that the shadow work begins here. It's where the ego shatters. And after our world blackens, it begins to whiten. That's stage 2. As the world falls down, there's clarity. In our pain, we receive new insight. Clarity doesn't erase pain, it lets us see what we're blind to. This is referring to what happens when we wait a moment to feel our emotions, to feel the pain. The next step is yellowing. This is the stage in which we reorient ourselves. Given that we've lost what we knew and we've found something a little different, how are we going to reorient this into our lives? This is where we shape our new values and new priorities. Which leads us to the last step of reddening. Once we have decided the new direction we are going to be headed, we can solidify this new identity. We integrate all that we've learned. For a person who has undergone this process, you no longer disown the pain, but rather it becomes a part of your wholeness. It's like the process of a butterfly. The insect can't go from a caterpillar to a butterfly. It has to undergo the process in the cocoon. T.S. Eliot said, "In order to arrive at what you are not, you must go through the way in which you are not." And I really think it's as simple as that. We have to reorient ourselves, allowing our assumptions to fall down in order to create new ones. And this leads us to the last function of pain, that it connects. Thornton Wilder said, "Without your pain, where would your power be? It is your very remorse that makes your low voice tremble into the hearts of men. The very angels themselves cannot persuade the wretched and blundering children on earth, as can one human being broken on the wheel of living. In love's service, only the wounded soldiers can serve." The truth is, pain makes you relatable. That's because everyone experiences it. And I believe as humans we do a great disservice when we shove it under a rug, when it's too taboo to talk about, because it is who we are. Think about your greatest relationships, your dearest friends. Are they people you feel comfortable to be vulnerable with? I know I prize my greatest relationships, and I know the reason I prize them is because they're relationships that I've been able to go to in hard times. They're relationships that I felt connected toward, that I know I can ask for help when I need it. and I know that they trust me to ask for help when they need it. In this reciprocation of love and connection and help, our bond grows deeper, and I trust that the same is true for you. And so, to further emphasize these functions of pain, their positive roles that they can play in our life, let's take a look at the alternative. When pain isn't integrated, what happens? In psychology, they've termed two pathways that one can go to after they experience trauma. And although trauma is much more extreme than the generalized pain that I'm referring to today, I think the concepts still relate. And so for our purposes, we'll refer to trauma with pain. Ultimately, pain is inevitable. But the two pathways that psychologists have found come from how we process or avoid that pain. Ultimately, that decision of how we respond to the pain in our lives determines the outcome, the way it influences us. So the first pathway, pain leads to stress. This comes when we avoid pain, when we suppress it, or it fragments in our minds. When pain is unprocessed, feared, or repressed, the brain keeps replaying the threat. The nervous system stays dysregulated. It becomes a threat instilled in our mind. The trauma embeds in the amygdala, hippocampus, and autonomic nervous system, and it leads to hypervigilance, emotional numbing, flashbacks, disassociation, anxiety, and depression. And although these symptoms refer to those with post-traumatic stress who have experienced real trauma in their life, similar symptoms show up for those who dysregulate their pain. Ultimately, when pain isn't integrated, it becomes a loop the body relives. I thought I wrote it somewhere in here, maybe it'll come up, but there's a quote that says, "Pain talks, and if it isn't listened to, it screams." And that's really how it works. Just because we avoid pain doesn't mean it leaves. Again, from the book, The Black Sun, Stanton Marlan refers to Kalshed, who talks about the different ways that people avoid pain. First, they can disperse the self into fragments, referring to disassociation, or encapsulate it and soothe it with fantasy, schizoid withdrawal, or numb it with intoxicating substances, referring to addictions, or persecute it to keep it from hoping for life in this world, referring to depression. Hope would open the soul, leaving it vulnerable to what is imagined as an even more painful experience than that which the protective demon enforces on the wounded personal spirit. I want you to think about that for a moment. He takes all these common terms, disassociation, depression, addiction, even schizotypal fantasies, and connects them all back to how we process pain. When it's avoided, when it's suppressed, when it's fragmented, all these things can happen. You can think about it for yourself. Is it really true? Let's look at the other pathway. The alternative is that pain can lead to what's called post-traumatic growth. Instead of post-traumatic stress, it can lead to growth. This comes when we consciously engage with the pain. We don't run away from it, but we feel it. Pain is faced, processed, and reflected on. When we do this, we can make meaning with it. It's not just about survival. The brain begins to reorganize the identity. It creates new connections in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. And ultimately, this results in greater resilience, deeper empathy, realigned values, strengthened purpose, and self-concept. And these are symptoms, right, of those who experience post-traumatic growth. And although, again, this is referring to people who experience extreme trauma, the concepts still apply to pain. I've written here, pain metabolized transforms us. I found an unknown quote that reads, "Ignored pain festers, integrated pain transforms." And that's really it. That's the hallmark. When we ignore pain, it festers. But When we integrate it, when we face it, it has the capacity to transform us. And so let's end where we began. Back to that book, The Beauty Born from Darkness. The black sun is not annihilation. It is the mysterious source. But how could it be? It's because pain is not an emotion itself. Rather, it precedes emotion. Pain is a biopsychological signal that triggers emotion. And so when we push it away, when we try to avoid it, it doesn't get rid of the emotion. The signal still passes by. It may show up in different ways. We may be able to feel numb to it, but it's there all the same. And so there arises here a mystical paradox. In descending fully into pain, we find the beginnings of transformation. It's not a matter of escaping the dark, but letting the dark speak. See what it has to say. And so I encourage you to actively reflect on the things we've talked about today. What part of your pain is asking to be listened to? What gold is hiding inside your blackening? Stanton Marlan's book ended with this quote I'm about to share that I really loved. In all my research, I've come to the conclusion that because pain is something we can't avoid, happiness is something we can't necessarily hold on to. Our emotions will fluctuate. We'll be happy sometimes and we'll also be sad. But I believe there is beauty and importance to both. And in these closing lines, Stanton refers to another author named Arthur Zajong. In his work, The Entwined History of Light and Mind, he states, "As we leave light's expansive dominions, the heavens dim and darkness quietly falls. Within that darkness there is a silent murmur, a still voice that whispers of yet another and unsuspected part to light, for even utter darkness shimmers with its force. So our journey to the black sun ends with a whisper that began and ends in darkness, a darkness no longer light's contrary, but a point of possibility in which light and dark both have their invisible origin, a simulacrum of substance in a world without foundations." And so there it is, my ending thought for you to think on as you go throughout the rest of your day. What if darkness and light, what if they both come from the same place? Obviously, the world around us isn't black and white. It's complex. And so are we. The next time you feel emotional pain looming in your mind, don't run, but see what it has to say.